Hi folks! For those of you who are new to this series, I'm volunteering at Mission Garden in Tucson and putting together a homebrew data logger for monitoring temperature and humidity in a covered garden plot. The goal is to compare covered conditions to an uncovered plot for the purpose of understanding how shade might be used for climate change resiliency in gardening and in growing food crops. This latest video documents progress and challenges in the hopes it might help others interested in building something similar for their own purposes. As always, details of data collection, results, and new sensors will continue to be added over time, so please subscribe if you'd like to receive updates. For those of you who just want me to cut to the chase, we now have two temperature and humidity sensors housed in 3D printed ASA filament radiation shields that have been mounted on two stands of equal height at an elevation of about 4 feet. Here's a quick view of the new field installation. Suffice it to say the logger is successfully recording data from both sensors as of Wednesday, March 25th, 2026. Between September 25th of 2025 and February 10th of 2026, the initial solar-powered setup collected close to 20,000 records on a 15-minute interval from a single HDC 302 temperature and humidity sensor housed in a homebrew radiation shield. The collected data yielded no outliers or out-of-the-ordinary trends, demonstrating the design is robust, but there's still more work to do. First, since time and materials are being donated, I came up with a cheap alternative to a commercial radiation shield, required for collecting accurate data. My alternative initially employed cheap plastic dishes for shielding the sensor, which obviously will not last in our harsh desert environment. I've since designed and replaced the plastic housing with a 3D printed alternative made of UV and heat-resistant ASA for two sensors. Details of the design and links to the STL for those wanting to print their own housing are available in the description of this video. Second, I encountered a 6-foot wire limitation in distance between my I2C sensors and the data logger before signals were being dropped. Although I was employing an I2C booster to get over distance limitations, the signal was still failing at distances greater than 6 feet. So what's going on? All right, folks, it's Tuesday, February 10th, and I'm just dropping by because I'm going to do a little experiment with a rewired I2C board. So what I'm going to do is disconnect everything, take this thing home, and test it out. This is the nice thing about making a modular design is when you're in situations like this, it's really easy just to unplug everything and then just unscrew it from the board, and you can move it, test it, fix it, do whatever you got to do. So I'm going to do that right now. For the debug, let's back up a couple chapters where I summarize using a protoboard for attaching multiple I2C sensors using Ethernet cables to improve overall system modularity. Here you can see the backside of the protoboard showing how one rail is used as a surrogate for power to the I2C booster, and a second rail is used to combine all the I2C pins together, all of which are connected to the appropriate pins on the I2C booster. The VIN and ground from the sensor protoboard is then connected to the power rail on the first protoboard, and the I2C rail is connected to the SCL and SDA pins on the data logger for I2C communications. However, the approach of tying everything upstream and downstream of the protoboard to the physical pins on the booster essentially short circuits the booster, which in turn means I'll lose signal since I2C is not designed for distance. This is a fairly elementary mistake to make by someone who's not formally trained in electronics, so I share it here in the event it might help others from making the same mistake. Upon revisiting the learning section on Adafruit's website, I figured out that for the booster to work, the I2C devices need to be attached via stemma connector on the breakout board. Unfortunately, this requires having to purchase a special cable to engage the booster. This adds convenience in being able to connect sensors via these plug-and-play sockets, but it can also be a little annoying when you just want to prototype using soldered connections without the need for special cables. In response, I purchased the required cable and soldered up a new board, this time using terminal connectors for my I2C sensors that still connect to one of the protoboard power rails for convenience, but are now linked to the stemma plug on the I2C extender via the required stemma cable. This ensures that the booster chip is engaged, which then allows me to connect the physical pins to the board to my I2C pins on my microcontroller. This approach now engages the booster chip as intended and has been successfully tested. Having said that, I had to overcome one more obstacle, and that was in selecting a weatherproof signal wire that would hold up to the outdoor elements. I could do a whole separate video on all the different cables I tested with no luck. To prevent you from having to deal with the same, I'll summarize by saying this was the cable I landed on for a successful test. Of greatest significance, what made this wire unique compared to the others I tested is that it's 23 gauge solid copper wire. Note this wire is unshielded, but it does carry a, quote, internal spline to eliminate crosstalk, providing exceptional transmission and performance with lowest possible signal loss, unquote. But what I think is most important is the gauge and the fact that it's solid wire. All right, this is my next attempt using a different cable. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. This is 50 foot of cable. Everything's been wired up properly, double checked. Let's turn it on and hope for the best. Okay, there's my splash screen. Come on, yes! Oh my God, that was so hard. All right. Okay, so this seems to be working. This is the cable I want to use moving forward. This is 50 feet of cable. I'm getting temperature and humidity, which is awesome. And now I know. So I'll post this link for this cable to the YouTube channel so that others don't have to go through what I just went through. Next, I purchased 2 new HDC sensors to minimize any bias from any drift in sensor performance that might have occurred from my initial field test. This is highly unlikely, but it doesn't hurt to be safe. Since I'm now working with 2 I2C sensors, the default I2C address will need to be reprogrammed on the second sensor. This is done by selectively soldering the A0 and A1 pads on the back of the sensor, allowing for the addition of up to 3 additional sensors to my setup. In my case, I'll only need 1 additional for covered and exposed garden comparison. This slide from Adafruit's Learning section shows the options available for soldering those pads and the respective addresses I selected for my installation. Fortunately, Adafruit's libraries for this sensor don't require me to know the address. Rather, simply just instantiate 2 HDC objects in code for distinguishing between the two. And here you can see the instantiation of those 2 sensor objects in my code. I wrote several functions in my setup block to get things fired up, including starting my OLED display, my real-time clock, my SD card reader on my Datalogger, my sensors, and finally to include a header file for my subsequent CSV file where my data will be stored on an SD camera card. Similarly, for my loop, I used Adafruit's sample code for echoing time and battery status, capturing sensor state, echoing and recording data, and then delaying for a predetermined interval before doing so all over again. I won't spend any more time on coding since the program will be available in the description of this video and is licensed under Creative Commons and free for your use, with the caveat that although my code probably isn't as efficient as what might be developed by AI or someone trained in programming, it's very easy to read and debug while leaving plenty of memory for future improvements via sensor add-ons. I tested this code using 2 sensors adjacent to one another in their own 3D printed ASA filament radiation shields. Here's some background on that front. It's February 20th, a little bit after 5:30 p.m., and I'm out here on my back patio. I've gone ahead and wired up 2 brand new HDC sensors into 2 brand new ASA radiation shields. These are the ones that are going to be installed in Mission Gardens. And I've hooked them up to the Datalogger. You can see that they're pretty close, within 0.05 of a degree Celsius. So that's very promising. Initially, the temperatures matched fairly well, but over time, I started to run into up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit of difference between the 2. Since the timing of the differential is consistently at around 8:30 a.m. and 3 p.m., this suggests that one of the shields may be shading the other as the sun moves across the sky. That experiment clued me into the need for doing the best I can in my field installation to minimize any shading between the two sensors over the course of a day. Of course, this isn't always possible, given the potential shade that the covered garden, located to the west of the uncovered garden, might realize as the sun sets. So it's something I'm going to have to keep an eye on during the formal experiment. But one thing I can do to minimize bias is ensure the two sensors are mounted at the same elevation. So I've gone ahead and I've made these little brackets for holding that 3D printed UV shield and giving me a way to attach it to my stands. And I've got a couple of these insulators to keep the heating from the metal from affecting the UV shields. So those will go between the UV shield and the bracket. Okay, Mission Gardens indicated they wanted the sensor to be between 4 and 5 feet above soil level. So I've gone ahead and set this up so that the base of the UV radiation shield is going to be right at about 45.5 inches. And then the sensor itself is just under 3 inches above the base of the radiation shield. So that puts me right at about 4 feet. So that's the low end of what they wanted, but that'll work because if they want to raise it later on, they can always just put a cinder block underneath that stand. It's a lot harder to lower it. I guess you could just by digging a hole, but anyway, that gets them in the ballpark of what they want. Okay, folks, here's my two stands for my two radiation shields hosting the two HDC sensors. Okay, you can see from ground level, the sensor is right at about 48 inches. So that's what I was hoping for. On this one as well, got about 48 inches. So the goal of that is to make sure that I'm comparing apples to apples. And next thing I need to do is clean all the rust off these stands and paint them white so they don't get hot. Okay, folks, it's March 3rd, about 8:30 p.m. And I've got two 50-foot length cables running to these two HDC sensors for humidity and temperature, and they are both recording. All right, folks, it's the morning after, and you can see that the temperature difference between the two is marginal. It's about 1/10 of a degree Celsius. So let's go get this installed. Okay, folks, Wednesday, March 25th, 10:30 a.m. And I just visited the station to turn things on since they've already determined where they're going to place their air temperature humidity sensors in both plots. You can see that they've placed them. I figure now's a good time to start collecting data. In about a half hour. The temperature difference is maybe 3/4 of a degree Celsius right now. Voltage is good. So that's a quick summary of what's been going on over the last few months with the formal experiment at Mission Garden beginning in March of 2026. Again, I'll be adding more sensors moving forward, including soil temperature and light monitoring. If you'd like updates on how things are progressing, please consider subscribing. And thumbs up are always appreciated. Thanks for that. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.